Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Weekly Wind-Up, here in the studios of Kirklees Local Television. Each week, we discuss and debate the news, topical issues, local and regional problems, and the impact such have on our local community. We aim to be informative, lively, amusing. Did I just say interactive? Yes, we need you to talk to us. As we speak and debate and discuss issues, please talk back to us. You can do so at info@kirkleeslocaltv.com or on Twitter at the Weekly Wind-Up. I am Pastor Napier, your host for today's show, and I'd like to welcome our very special guests who are here to enlighten and inspire us. We have Kyle Warwick, one of our very own here in Kirklees Local TV, and also Caleb Andrews, our very own in Kirklees Local TV. And we are so fortunate to have today Josh Elderfield, and he is the president from Huddersfield University there in the Student Union. Welcome to today's program. Well, we're going to start by discussing something that happened in Scotland where young people were challenged to make their ballots known in the referendum there. And we want to find out today in the studio, is it right for 16 and 17-year-olds to go to the ballot boxes? And Caleb, we're going to start with you as a young people. What are your views? Do you think that young people, 16 and 17-year-olds, should be voting?
Well, personally, 16 and 17-year-olds don't really, in my opinion, don't really have the right attitude to be voting on these sorts of things. Basically, there's not enough education around politics throughout school, and 16 and 17-year-olds, they just don't seem very interested. So, I mean, if they were educated in the ways of politics a lot more than they are at the moment, then that would leave room for more maturity to grow within that age group. So that would make them.
So what would you say to our viewers who think that at 16 and 17 they're very mature, some of them having 2 children, they're working, they're doing things which are quite more mature than a lot of 30-year-olds? What would you say to those people who are now watching and engaging?
Well, I think if there's 16, 17-year-olds that are working full-time and have children and have moved out of the house, then that's perfectly fine with them voting because they know what sorts of things they want to get out of their country.
Well, we're gonna bring in Kyle here because Kyle has moved on from that age group, but I'm quite sure that he has a very well-balanced view on these things. What are your views? Are they too young? Are they mature enough?
I agree to a certain extent with some of what Caleb said, and I feel like maybe the referendum in Scotland was a special situation in that it was so pervasive through the entirety of Scotland that you couldn't help know the issues going on behind the referendum. But I do feel like we encourage young people to be increasingly responsible. And a lot of young people are leaving school, going straight into work, or like you say, starting families. And I think they have as much right paying taxes and having left school and being part of a wider society. I feel that they do have the right to influence how that society is led, and I think that means that they should be allowed to vote. I feel like it, not only do they have that right, but I feel like it might encourage a sense of responsibility within young people. It's all right to say that they maybe don't know about issues, but if they don't need to know about them, then they're not going to find out about them.
That's right.
If you allow them to vote, then they're a lot more likely to get involved in issues that affect the country at a younger age, and it'll possibly encourage them to become more responsible citizens as well.
We're fortunate to have Josh with us, and you are working with thousands of students here. What are your views? What's the consensus of the university? Would you think that young people should vote?
Well, first of all, I think if young people are engaged enough and want to vote, they should definitely have the right. We need to remember that, you know, in the last general election, there were issues that affected people of this young age, in particularly tuition fees that affected especially the students at the university, and also for those who are at college, the EMA. We lost the EMA, and a lot of things like that affect people at this young age. And in my opinion, it's not fair that these people who are being affected by these cuts are not having a say, they're not having their voice heard, and they don't have the right at the moment to be able to cast their views on issues like this that really do affect them. that could be the determining factor between them going to university or college or just not. So I think, in my opinion, they need to have the right to vote, especially if there's issues like this that are going to affect them.
Great. Well, I've got a document here in my hand from Kirklees Youth Council. Unfortunately, they could not be here today, but nevertheless, we want you to understand that Kirklees has an active youth council, and they had a discussion on votes at 16. At 16 plus and 17, young people are making economic contributions to the country. Should they also do the same politically? Well, I may add to the government on their old boat, conservative, all the parties have got a youth arm that they're training up the next generation. Should young people be actively involved in politics, and should we give them the right to vote? Kyle?
I'd say definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot of arguments that will come from the no side. You know, there tends to be a lower turnout amongst younger people at election time than maybe your sort of 25s upwards. But maybe as well that's got something to do with lack of representation for young people in politics in general. I don't agree with political parties having youth arms. It sounds quite a lot like get them young, indoctrinate them and get them in the party line. That isn't the way that I see it should work. I feel that, you know, you maybe should have to be 18 to qualify to be part of a political party. But up until that point, you should be allowed to vote, but form your own opinions and be allowed to form your own opinions before you have the party line shoved down your throat by a specific political party.
Caleb?
Yeah, I agree entirely with what Kyle said. There's not a lot of room for young people in parties. They don't make time for them, but when they do, they seem to force everything they've got upon them. Like a lot of parties do talks in colleges and schools and things, and it's not necessarily about politics. It's about their party, which can sort of change a young person's view quite easily.
Josh?
Yeah, we shouldn't forget that, you know, people of this age are legal to have sex, be prosecuted and join the army, for example.
That's right.
So they should certainly be able to have a say on their future. It's these people in particular who will witness the changes, or perhaps the lack of change, over the next 5 years or so. And I think restricting this right will not encourage them to vote once they're old enough. It will only discourage them. So I think young people in particular do need to have the say, and I think they need to speak up and let their voice be heard. And I think, as I say, they're old enough to do other things. They're legal to do other things, so they should be legal to vote.
So,
I was just going to say, I do feel like these sort of debates come up closer and closer to election time, and I do feel like it's kind of the main political parties trying to weigh up whether or not, or what percentage of that vote they would get.
Yes.
Would it improve their chances of getting elected? And I think, to be honest with you, they're not really too bothered about the opinions of young people. They're just interested in getting themselves re-elected, and if they feel like getting 16 to 17-year-olds the vote will make their opportunity to get elected more likely, then I think they'll push for it. I don't think that's going to be the case with the Conservative Party. You're certainly not going to see it with somebody like UKIP pushing for it. I mean, the majority of their votership is, 40 plus.
Yeah.
So it might be a case of one of the, Green Party, Labour. If Labour actually wants to stand up for what they're supposed to be standing up for, then maybe Labour pushing for something like that. Because I could see a lot of young people being quite disenfranchised with what's gone on in government in the last 4 or 5 years, and wanting to vote for change.
So in that case, can we take it back to the basic then as we wind this up? Should parents have more to do with their children in the front room, around the TV set, discussing politics, the economics and everything like that, so that the young people can be inspired more from home?
Parents do have an influence on the way that young people think throughout the entirety of their growing up. I think that's whether you engage with your child or not, you're going to have an influence on the way that they think. But I do think young people, it doesn't matter, politics touches every aspect of society. And young people, whether they're talking about like freedom of speech or the way that they access music or anything like that, all these are influenced by things that go on in government. So whether they're actually sat there talking about specific political party policies is completely irrelevant. They still have a political viewpoint.
They do.
So giving them the right to vote will just, to me, make them think about how their own opinions align with certain political parties, and that will influence the way that they want to vote more than, say, their parents encouraging them to vote a particular way.
Thank you, Kyle. Unfortunately, we've got to bring that segment to an end. But if you're out there and you're very passionate about your youth vote, lobby your MP, lobby your local councillor, get involved with the debate. We're taking a short break now, but don't touch that button. We'll be right back. The weekly wind-up here at Kirklees Local TV. Welcome back to your weekly wind-up, and here in the studio today we've got Kyle, and we've got Caleb, and we've got Josh from the University of Huddersfield. And we are now going to look at, it's all parents want their children to go to university. They want them to be doctors, they want to be lawyers and dentists, and so there's a pressure on young people to go to university. But let us look at the alternative, the apprenticeship, going to employment. I said, what do you think, Josh? Do you think there's so much pressure on young people today to go to university? And could they take up the other options?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure for students, whether they're at GCSE level, perhaps even thinking about it there. College certainly are going to be thinking about it at sixth form. There's a lot of pressure for students at that age, from parents, from themselves as well. But I think they should be assured that university isn't the only option, and that speaks a lot coming from someone who's actually from a university background. I would employ as many people to go to university as possible, but what I would say is think about your options as well, because I've got a close friend who did an apprenticeship and they've come on leaps and bounds since 17, and you know they're doing very well now. You don't need to do well in life you don't need to go to university to do well in life. And my best friend is certainly reaping the benefits now of doing an apprenticeship. And I've got a friend who's also working, who went straight into work after 16. So again, university isn't the only option, but it certainly opens doors, and it certainly opened doors for me. So what I would say is just keep your options open.
Right. Well, Kyle, as a graduate, you may look back now and thinking, you know, all these things are now, the government is rolling out the apprenticeship program. Employers are trying to get a lot of young people into job. I mean, what do you think? Do you think we need to stop pressuring our youngsters to go university or to take up the other options?
I think it's very much dependent on the individual situation, really, and what vocation that individual wants to go into. I mean, university is certainly, I mean, you can learn so many different things, take so many different courses at university now, that and a degree will stand you in great stead coming out of university. Yes. But if you're wanting to go into plumbing, then you're more than likely your best route is an apprenticeship. And I do feel like there are certain jobs where you'd be better off going into an apprenticeship. But on the flip side of that, I do feel like at the moment, under this government, apprenticeship schemes are now being applied wider and wider to a far wider range of jobs, to jobs that would never had an apprenticeship scheme before. I saw an application for an apprenticeship bartender, which to me, that is, you know, somebody can come in and learn bartending on a minimum wage, and you can pick it up over the basics up over a course of a couple of weeks. Doing an apprenticeship scheme for a bar job, to me, it smacks of bringing the minimum wage down to something that's more acceptable to a Conservative government. Yeah. And that's kind of across the board, encouraging people, going to apprenticeships, do apprenticeships, shoving apprenticeships down everybody's throat, so that they can basically bring down the minimum wage for 16 to 25-year-olds to £2.80 an hour, which I find disgusting, to be honest with you.
Well, Caleb, as a young person on this panel, Do you think the alternative to university are just as good and you can stand out in society and be who you are, or do you have to go to university?
Well, university is a really good thing, but it all depends on your personal situation. It's what sort of job you're wanting to go into, whether university would be the best option for that, or whether an apprenticeship or just going straight into work for something like that. I mean, like, over the past few years, there's been a lot of hype around going to university, that you're absolutely rammed with it as soon as you get into college, and even in the last couple of years of high school, you are constantly reminded that university is the best option. And then, as well as that, you get your teachers going, but there's also apprenticeships. So it really does confuse a lot of people whether they should go for apprenticeships or university. And with the degrees standing people in like great stead for future work, they think that that's the best option, but sometimes an apprenticeship can be better for some people.
When we go back to what Kyle is saying about the apprenticeship program, is it also a bit of exploitation now that we're taking it way down too far, where we're literally exploiting young people, taking them on as apprenticeship, but they're actually doing a job rather than being an apprentice?
I think I wouldn't have such a problem with it if there was a guarantee of a job at the end of the apprenticeship scheme. But what seems to be happening more and more now is that apprentices are finishing their apprenticeship, being let go, and other apprentices are being brought in to do their job from scratch, which just means that you're not really getting the skilled people into work. You're just keeping the minimum wage at £2.80. You know, it's not the way that the apprenticeship scheme was set up in its original form. It was for you to learn specific skills before you then went on to earn a full-time wage at a specific company, and I think that's happening less and less.
So thank you very much for your views on that matter. And finally, here in the studio, we are going to be looking at mental health briefly with our young panel here. Recently, the statistics are out that so many young people, children, but young people are accessing more than ever. As young people, are we taking the mental health message seriously?
Mental health is always going to be an issue everywhere.
Yes.
And the provisions that are there for young people, especially with mental health problems, aren't actually that great in my opinion. With counselling, it can take around 6 months just to get one session. And that's going through numerous doctor's appointments and getting referred by your doctor, like say, a few times, and then still having to wait that 6 months just to get your counselling appointment. And then during that time, your problems can get a lot worse. So I think it's just a case of we need to be quicker about getting people into these sessions and helping them.
Josh?
In my opinion, it doesn't seem like the government are taking it seriously enough. As you've mentioned, we've seen cuts over the last few years, and we've also seen that the NHS have had to shut more than 1,700 beds of mental health patients in the last few years, and this has really stretched adult psychiatric wards where they're really nearly reaching capacity, and patients are having to be sent to private hospitals and stuff. And so I don't think the government are taking it seriously at all, and they've got a lot to answer for, in my opinion. And it's not fair that patients with mental health illnesses are facing the brunt of this.
I know you want to get in, Kyle, go ahead.
I'd totally agree with that. I feel like it's a scary situation when you're kind of looking at mental health services and the NHS and almost looking at them and saying, how can it get any worse? And then you're thinking, well, there's another couple of £1 billion worth of cuts coming if we vote Conservative again. So what is it going to be like at the end of that 4 years, 5 years? The situation is just, I mean, more and more people are having to rely on mental health charities, which it's great that those services are out there, but it's just negligent to force people into a situation where they can't access these services through the National Health Service. It's what the National Health Service is there for. The National Health Service has been dismantled in the last few years, and it's one of those situations where young people are kind of more and more needing to access those services, but finding it more and more difficult to find those services in their area. And like Caleb says, if they do manage to access them, it can take 6 months just for you to get to see somebody and talk to someone. If you're in the depths of depression, 6 months is a massive amount of time. It's a massive amount of time.
What message would we like to send to the young people who are listening to us regarding the care and guard and protection of our mental health? What message would you like to send out to them, Josh?
I would probably say read up about it as much as you can, be educated on as much as possible, and see if you can do your bit, whether it's volunteering at home or donating or anything like that. Doing your bit, being involved, being educated, and making sure that that is probably at the heart of, perhaps if you're political, what you think about for the next general election. Do bear in mind the NHS and those patients who are affected, and by volunteering at homes and places like that, that will certainly hit home for you guys. And so that's the message I would send.
Mental health, it's always going to be with us, from the White House to Buckingham Palace to our celebrities. We're always going to be faced with this crisis. It's not a shame, just get in touch. If any of these matters we've discussed are affecting you, please get in touch with us. We're interactive. We want you to speak to us. Get on it now. info@kirkleeslocaltv.com or on Twitter @Weekly Windup. That's all we've got time for. Only to say thanks to my guests and thank you for tuning in. See you next time.